Hello, Romantics. I'm Sarah Gomez, author, romance lover, and host. You're listening to Romancing the Story, a podcast centered around writing, reading, and story structure, all with a twist of romance. We're at episode 30, and on today's episode, I talk with Khushi T Saha about how her experience as a South Asian woman has influenced her writing and the collective experience and finding love and connection. Just an FYI, I do make reference to the recent announcement of Barnes & Noble's not stocking debut hardcovers, which affected a lot of authors, including those marginalized. A link to the article can be found in the show notes with more details. It just serves as an example of how the publishing world is changing, and now more than ever is a great time to support both traditionally published and indie authors. That way they keep writing our favorite stories. Wanted to provide more clarification since I had only heard a little bit about it. Also, be sure to stay tuned till the end of the episode if you want to learn where to find Khushi's romance books, the Liberated Series, and keep up with her writing. Links and information are also in the show notes of the episode. With that said, let's jump right in. Welcome, romance author and empath at heart, Khushi T Saha. Yay!
Hello. Thank you, Sarah, for having me.
Well, thank you so much for joining the podcast.
Yeah.
In case listeners don't know, can you tell them a little bit about yourself and your writing?
Yes. So I am actually a new romance author on the scene. And I really do focus on interracial and contemporary stories. It's just something that I've been passionate about actually quite recently. As an avid romance reader myself, I found that there was a bit of a white space, and I couldn't find myself a woman who is of South Asian descent and brought up in the US, somebody who's in an interracial relationship myself. So that's kind of how my career as a contemporary writer began.
Awesome. And I think you picked, like I was telling you before, the perfect timing
Yes.
for all of this, for the book and everything. You have a romance series called the Liberated Series.
Yes.
And right now it's kind of a discourse of the South Asian experience is very much
Hmm.
in the discourse of, especially the romance community, after
Yeah.
profile romances of like Priyanka Chopra and Nick
Hmm.
Jonas, and after Bridgerton season 2.
Yes,
So,
exactly.
and your heroine in the book is incredibly smart. She's feisty,
Yes.
she's ambitious, but most of all, she's relatable. So, how
Right.
important was it that you have that South Asian experience integrated into your romance, and why did you choose romance as the genre?
Sure. So, first and foremost, I want to address the relatable part. I think that what I was trying to do was represent somebody that may not look like everybody, but that, as a woman, experiences what all women are experiencing in life in terms of, our challenges, our focus, our goals, and that kind of thing. So that's why Simran is relatable and written the way she is. It was really important for her to be South Asian because I'm South Asian. My parents are from Bangladesh, and
Mm.
I'm first generation. I was born and raised here in the Midwest, if you will. And I just, I'm a reader of all fiction, to be honest. But I was in a romance kind of not slog, but I was just reading a lot of romance at one point about a year and a half ago, and I felt like there wasn't enough brown representation in terms of an interrelational relationship. We are seeing a lot of brown representation with a lot of authors, which is amazing. But I didn't see the interracial aspect of that. I myself am married to an American man. I have two small kitty cat little boys, and what is that like dating, marrying, and creating a life together. So that's kind of where I went. So she had to be South Asian. And the reason why I picked romance was just because I was saying earlier, there is not enough interracial romance out there. And there's a handful, don't get me wrong. There are a few authors out there that I follow that I feel like they do an incredible job. But there isn't enough of the self-reflection that I try to incorporate in my writing based on my own experiences. And I know other women of South Asian descent feel the same way.
Well, and it's no wonder that is, since you were drawing experience from your own, maybe your own relationship and how that worked, because
Right.
my parents are from two different cultures as well. I'm
Okay.
actually,
Yeah.
so I very much understood that very kind of tug, that push and pull of two different cultures
Yes.
and how those
Yes.
work. And so it felt very real when you were saying, when I was reading your book and you were talking about like how the family expectations are
Yes.
different and everything like
Yes.
that. So that was very authentic to me because I was just like,
Yeah.
oh, I've had these conversations with people.
Yeah. And I think that's the, my books are, the heroines are going to have South Asian heritage, but I think that women in many different cultures are going to feel the same thing. Family comes first, family responsibility comes first. What are you doing to support us, your parents or your family, over your own happiness? So it's struggles that we as first generations, or like you as somebody whose parents are from two different cultures, will struggle with and will hear as they grow up. And it becomes a challenge in their head when they decide, what is it that is truly going to, make my heart sing? What is going to make me happy?
Well, and I love that you point out too in your book, like the modern Indian woman, like you make a
Right.
distinction between that and like kind of the more traditional mindset, right? Like maybe someone who grew
Right.
up, like you said, as a first generation,
Mm-hmm.
um, uh, maybe a first generation inside the US. Now, how
Right.
did growing up like the first generation kind of influence this part of your writing?
Yeah. So I think a lot of South Asian women will feel this as they grew up, at least of my generation. I'm at the very end of Gen X. I'm very proud of that. But because I do know that younger women may not feel this as much as we did, which is, you can't date until you're older, or if you do, don't tell your parents about it. They don't need to know about that. Education, your future, making sure you're financially stable, all those things come first. That
Mhm.
has to come first. And then, and by all means, please go into something that is, monetarily successful, such as obviously being an engineer or a doctor, computer science, business, what have you, financials, that kind of thing. So there are little tidbits in the book that really do come from my own experience growing up, in terms of, as a little girl, as a brown little
Mm.
girl in the Midwest, and boys and dating and what that felt like. So I really wanted to make sure that that was emphasized, or at least portrayed in some point in Simran's like flashbacks, or even as she's, meeting other men, she's like, oh my God, this reminds me of when I was little, and and this is so not me. I'm not there anymore. I'm better than this. So those kinds of things absolutely pop up in there. But for sure, the idea that family comes first. You know, do I do what I want to do, or do I, in like gratitude, do what my parents want me to do because they went through so much to get here, or to
Mm.
make sure I had a life in the U.S. or the West that was successful. So I owe something to them. So you'll see the idea of South Asian guilt represented in the book, because that
Mm.
is absolutely what a lot of brown people, and I'm not going to say just brown people, Asians, for instance, the entire continent of Asians will feel that that is the reason why they have to do what their parents want them to do. And there are people in my generation who have absolutely followed through with that, and unfortunately their lives today are not necessarily as happy as they would, and they're successful on the outside. They're completely successful, but internally you can tell they're struggling. So
Mm.
that was something that was important to me too, because there are some people close to me that I can see that it's just not going for them. So it's something I wanted to get out there. And you have to be very active in the decisions you make, and it's hard. It is so hard. I'm not saying it's easy. It was hard for me. You know, uh, Being an author is new, but before that, I had I do have a very creative lifestyle, and my parents were like, "What are you going to do with that?" So there was
Mm.
only support if I did X, Y, and Z, and not even financially. It was more like they would not be upset with me if I did X, Y, and Z. For instance, go get a business degree, and then I can go and pursue the creativity side of things. It was important to showcase that in my writing, because in a way, this story was very cathartic for me. You know, it was pen to paper, because I was going through something personally about a year and a half ago, and the story just started flowing, and it became what it was, or what it is today.
Well, and I love that you have such honest conversations like that are ingrained into the book as well. Like honest conversations like about you the main character, the heroine did have that, like you were talking about, that South Asian, like that guilt inside of her, right? When her father was over in India and like going over to see him. Like, I know you talked about that. And also the hero, she had a very honest conversation with the hero about her own experiences and about things that you might say, someone else who might be like come from another culture, like white or anything like that, or me, I'm Hispanic, like I might not know, but then I say it like you say the word, he at one point he uses the word exotic, and she says, well, hey, maybe not use that word.
Yeah, she's like, that's gross.
Exactly. Like I thought that was super honest to write about. And I appreciate that, because there are things like me and my husband come from two different cultures. He's white, I'm Hispanic. And sometimes we have those discussions.
Totally. And I'll be honest, that the way that played out, that actually happened in my relationship with my now husband. And when we first met and he said something along those lines, I kind of thought it was cute and I laughed it off. But as I grew older and had my children, I felt like, God, that's yucky. So I wanted to, I mean, don't get me wrong, women find that, as a compliment, that's fantastic. But I kind of just felt very much like I was being objectified. So as I thought more about it, so I wanted to represent that experience in a different, I wanted to live vicariously through Simran and how she would play out and be like, ew, I wish I had done that. And it's a conversation I had later with my husband. He's like, really? That was offensive? So it's good. It's almost like, a teaching experience for myself that I wish I had done something different. And I wanted to showcase a strong woman who wouldn't take that crap.
No, you did a great job. And I thought it was very, for me, being on the other side of it, I was like, that makes sense. Sometimes if you come from even within your own culture and traditions, sometimes if someone says something to me, like if someone calls me, some people think it's okay to call feisty, but because I'm Hispanic, I'm just like, excuse me.
Yeah. Right.
Things like that. Some people, it might not offend other people, but then, depending on your culture, your background, sometimes those conversations are good to have.
Yes.
And I love that you had them so honestly. And it really just, I felt like as a reader, I was like, that makes sense, of course. And I love having those tidbits in there that I felt like I know a little bit more about Simran. Like I know more about her experience, like you said, as a brown girl, as a South Asian. Like I know more about her experience just hearing that.
And I'm glad that you say that, because as I mentioned, there's a lot of brown representation in fiction out there now, which is amazing. These writers, don't get me wrong, they are incredible writers, but you're seeing the side of the glitz and the glam of those big weddings, or the food, or the loud music. And it's like there are other experiences that we as first generation South Asians go through, and it's really not represented or showcased, and it's being lost. And I think that it also kind of pushed me to write the story, because I do have children who are half white and half South Asian. So it was important for me to conjure up some of my experiences, so that as my kids grow up, because they're still small, but as they grow up, and if they start to have certain experiences, it's something that I can think back to what I experienced and how I went through that, or possibly, is there a different way to look at this? If it's something that's still bothering me, I'm in my early 40s now. If it's something that's still bothering me now, how could I come about it a little bit more differently? So, I just wanted to showcase some of those microaggressions, that those little tiny things that can happen in life, day to day that a lot of people don't get. Even my husband, a white man, will never understand. He'll be like, why did that offend you?
Yeah.
So,
Like I said, I think romance, and you pick such a perfect genre too. And I know romance right now is kind of having a big moment because people are using it as a
yeah.
vehicle to really tell their stories and try to um, utilize it in a way that tells honest experiences, right?
Hmm.
From where we
Right.
come from, like you said, from like an interracial romance
Right.
perspective. And so how did you go about like approach the writing of the South Asian traditions, the expectations, like you were saying, the
Yeah.
culture, because you were talking about, I know the wedding.
She was at a family friend's wedding. Yes, you
Oh,
are correct.
all right.
You remembered correctly that she was at a wedding. Yes, it's a lot of it is obviously conjured up from my experiences and what I know about the South Asian culture,
Mm,
um, and and writing it in kind of viewing it and writing it in a way as a woman who is straddling two cultures. Like I need to do this, and she was wearing some jewelry that meant a lot to her, something that is very important in the culture with in terms of like gold jewelry or passing something down through your family. And yeah, it was just important for me to represent that the reason why women wear that jewelry is not because it's all glitz and glam and Bollywood and whatever. Those are true gifts that are handed down through the family in case the husband's or the wife's marriage ends up being total shit. I mean, I don't mean to say that, but like it is in a way just a form of safety in case her
mm,
husband is a deadbeat. And so that is a tradition that's passed down. And granted, you'll find families who have absolutely more exquisite riches to hand down through their family, but it was important to show those kind of traditions and the reason why, because that's what I'm finding again, like people are not understanding why Indians wear so much gold jewelry. It's
mhm,
part of the culture. 24 karat gold is considered, very, very precious. And if someone is wearing it, then they come from a great family and they're successful and that kind of thing. So I just wanted to touch upon some of that. So in terms of everything else, yes, it comes from my experiences, from others around me, and not just girls, but boys as well, because there are South Asian boys I grew up with whose experiences were completely different from what mine were. There are
really?
kids I knew, yes, from when I was very young. And we're still social media friends. We still keep in contact with each other, but their lives were different. They were boys, and so they could get away with a lot more
Mm,
bad behavior, really bad behavior, if you will. But I that may just be that's not normal. I want to say that's normal, but it's not. But there are definitely different rules. There were different rules for girls versus boys. And whether your parents knew what you were doing, fine. But what your parents thought you were doing was the girl, you had to be home at a certain time. And some of these boys maybe didn't have to be because they're just boys.
mhm.
In any sense. It's just pulling some of these things from what I remember growing up with. And then even now, like I mentioned, I am in my early 40s. I know that other South Asians and maybe Gen Y or even, younger may have different experiences. So it's kind of like being a cultural anthropologist. I mean, I'm scouring Reddit, for different articles or just Facebook groups of, South Asians and interracial relationships, that kind of thing, just to understand what other South Asians are going through. And to be honest, it's still very similar. I mean, in some of these interracial South Asian Facebook groups, the women are mainly afraid to tell their family that they're dating somebody outside the culture and asking advice on what to do, like how to proceed with that. And these are, women who are in the United States for the most part and living independent lives. So it's still happening, and it's something that needs to be represented, like I mentioned, and just even if there's not a solution, at least these women can feel that they see themselves, in literature and fiction, and that they're being represented.
Absolutely. And I love that you're helping to normalize it too, because
Yeah,
that was, I
yeah,
remember growing up, I'm actually a millennial, and I remember, and I'm, I'm half and half. I'm half Hispanic. So
right, right.
but I remember that was always my first question for any boyfriend outside of my own culture, like a white boyfriend, I'd be like, do your parents mind if I'm Hispanic?
Yeah.
That was an
And that,
honest conversation.
and I don't know if your boyfriend was like, what? Because that is something that's ingrained in us, growing
Yeah,
up. That
exactly.
it's always going to be at top of mind. Like, is this okay, for you? Because I don't know if it's okay for me, but let's just first see if you're okay with it too. And then we'll proceed. So, yeah.
Exactly. And yeah, my now husband, obviously he was okay with that, but then I don't think
Yes.
he expected like the family to just like love on him and like basically include him in the fold. He was just
Oh,
like, it
but
was a lot.
that's amazing. Yeah, that's amazing though. I mean, at least it was that instead of like shunning somebody, they like brought, accepted him in it. That's amazing.
Exactly. Exactly. But yeah, that's an honest conversation. And like you were talking about the expectations of like, I mean, as soon as I started dating, they were just like, when are you getting married again? So
Oh my God.
like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right.
And
Totally.
you feel that throughout the entire book too, throughout the entire series, really, that's kind of a lot of Simran's struggles about being an independent, right? An
Right.
independent woman out there making
Right.
her way. And I feel like that is a collective experience we have as women, I'm sure, and I know, tradition and, like we were talking about the South Asian experience, there's more layers to that, obviously. But as a
Yes.
woman
Oh,
too, I think just being a woman in itself,
right.
there is this expectation of
Hmm.
like family and maternal instinct
Right.
and everything like that. So I appreciate you.
Clock's ticking,
I know, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, and I
Yeah.
appreciate you writing so honestly about that too. Like the family um asking her, she brings him to a function and they're all
Right.
like, there's a lot of expectation. They're asking her
Right.
about it. And so like, I appreciate you integrating that into that because I think we all feel
Yeah.
that. I don't see that enough in romance, really.
Yeah.
It's the woman putting the pressure on themselves a lot of times.
Right. I like to cut. This is a romance. Absolutely. You've got obviously the love story. You've got the angst. You've got the second chance. You've got the sex. But I feel like there's just a little bit more meat to it that I wanted
Hmm.
to ensure was incorporated. And do something a little bit different that maybe people haven't really read or seen out there. So,
Right. And that's kind of what I felt when I started reading it. Like, if you want to, I mean, you want some spicy hot time. Yes, go for it. Yes, listeners, definitely read it by far. Like there were a lot of like passion and really
yes,
get
yeah,
great chemistry between the hero and heroine, but you did layer it. And I very much appreciated that with all these really nice nuances between the culture and expectations. A lot of times what we put on ourselves and also
hmm,
what other people put on us as well.
right, right,
So, and speaking of the connection, you built such a strong connection between Simran and Mark. And
yes.
throughout the entire series, they are both passionate, strong willed characters. Things get steamy both in and out of the bedroom, guys. So, you did
That
a
was important for me.
yes. I mean, listen,
Yeah.
I like I like the fantasy aspect of romance. So I always
Yes.
appreciate that.
Yeah. Yes. Well,
So,
thank you.
do you find it challenging to write a harmonious balance and love between two very different cultures for your characters?
Um, yes, absolutely. I think I'm taking a lot from my experiences in dating and finally, finding the one in my life who happens to be not brown. But it's absolutely difficult because what you're trying to also represent is, as you mentioned, all of those nuances and make sure that the reader understands and that, um, you're not writing a bunch of gobbledygook and they're like, what is happening? I just want to get to the romance. I just want to get to the sex, whatever. You want to draw in the reader and what some of those internal struggles, what some of those things are coming from in terms of, at least for Simran. I do touch on some of Mark's struggles as well, but for her, yes, it was challenging. I'm not gonna lie, but it was a lot of like, somebody who's not South Asian, are you going to read it and understand what it is I'm trying to convey? And it sounds like, fingers crossed, that people are. So, yeah. But as I mentioned, it was also really cathartic. because it's just nice to get down some of the experiences that I went through with my crazy dating when I lived in New York for many years and
Mm.
and in California before that. So, in a time when men were still, they're interested in you, but they're also like, you're different still,
Mm.
so, just making sure that some of those nuances were included. Yeah. And what weaving it into the story, how do you weave that into the plot,
Mhm. I love that you mentioned that you've mentioned it's a catharsis. It was a catharsis because I've heard that quite a bit actually of all the new authors I've been interviewing lately, and I've
Yeah.
talked to a lot of them are saying like the romance has kind of become a catharsis for them to
Yeah.
either past pain from relationships or their own anything personally they were going through, like
Hmm.
anything like that, any midlife crisis or anything like that. They just kind of yeah,
Yes,
they started
absolutely.
exercising it through that.
Yes.
I love that this genre kind of has a lot of that power.
It really does, because there's so much to it. I mean, a romance can't be written unless both characters go through some kind of internal struggle and
Mhm.
development, and that has to make sense to the reader as well. So absolutely, it's cathartic, and I think a lot of authors are going to pick up on what they've experienced in life and maybe rewrite it a different way, or make sure that readers are aware that this is happening. For instance, I do touch on miscarriage and
Mhm.
cancer, and those big ideas in life and how those really can impact us, and how, how do you mentally get through that? So I think it's important that those things, those kind of ideas are included. And I do think that, yeah, for sure, authors. I think since COVID, I think that people have
Mm.
been like, writing has been. It's almost like journaling, and then you realize, oh my gosh, this could be something. This could be a real story for somebody to connect to. That's how I felt, at least. I mean, as I started writing, there was a personal reason, but there was also um, my kids, during May and Asian Awareness Month, they wanted a lot more experiences that South Asian parents had gone through growing up, and just email some of the teachers and let them know what they could be talking to their kids about in class, and that kind of spurred me on to write as well. And I started thinking about things that I've experienced growing up, and for me, I'm just like, I grew up with other South Asian girls. I have sisters. I know we've all experienced these things, but you really don't read about it. So it just turned into a love story.
Well, and I love too that romance because romance does have that HEA, right? So you
Yes,
can,
right.
no matter what's happening, no matter
Hmm.
how dark things seem or get,
Yeah.
we always still get that happily ever after. So
Yes. Yeah.
I think that's a big piece of the catharsis, at least for me when I read stuff and I'm just like, they still get there happily
Yeah.
ever
It's
after.
almost like you're struggling through a part, and you're like, but I know it's going to end happily, so I'll just keep pushing through,
Exactly. It's
see what
okay. They're
happens.
suffering now. It's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. 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 But what is the author going to do?
It kind of warms my heart that you mentioned about your children too, because actually I just recently read, I think it was earlier this week, Barnes and Nobles had cut back significantly on carrying certain books because it was like a nationwide strategy of some sort.
Oh,
But a lot of it affected a lot of marginalized authors.
okay.
And I'm like,
That's.
bummer, because if unless you're like Harry Potter selling
Hmm.
the big numbers,
Right.
you may not get featured very much. Like they weren't going to buy hardbacks or buy that much of certain books. And so a lot of these authors out there who are sharing their experiences from different cultures are kind of, they're not getting the mainstream. So it's important that uh the books like these who are
Hmm.
independently published and that show those experiences for what they are, the honest to goodness experiences, are out there available for other people to
Yeah,
find.
absolutely. And that makes me very sad to hear about Barnes and Noble, because in this day and age, that is your strategy.
Right, right,
That
of
doesn't make
all
any sense
things.
to me.
Like half the point of going to a bookstore is browsing and finding
Yeah,
something new. That's the fun part
right,
about it.
right. And again, it becomes homogenous, and you're not seeing the representation anymore, and you will
Exactly.
lose readers. You will lose people who want to go and find, the diversity. That's awful.
Right. And exactly. And like those open doors, because I mean, I was already I knew about interracial romance because of my parents, obviously,
Yeah.
but like the South Asian experience became more prominent to me once I saw, like I said, Bridgerton 2, like season
Yes. Yeah.
2. When
Right.
that came, I saw how it was integrated into the show. They used some
Hmm.
Bollywood music. They were talking about they showed the wedding, some of the wedding
Right.
traditions and things like that.
Exactly. Which
So
was
like,
amazing. Really amazing.
right? I love that
Yeah.
that was actually in such a popular medium, like that was
Yes.
in such big audience.
Yeah.
And it kind of made me want to go seek out and find more stories similar to
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So
Well, you're in luck because I
I
did
know.
write an epilogue. So
Exactly. The whole series is there to binge, everyone,
yeah.
in case you're curious about it. But also too, I am very thankful as well when you were writing it, you actually went into detail about certain aspects of the culture because you were mentioning when readers read it, you hope they see themselves in it. They hope that,
Hmm.
they see that there's not any kind of barrier there. And I love that you went into details about some of those things, like some certain, maybe like jargon, like certain words that might mean
Yes.
like, of course, collectively, I, some of us might know what aunties mean, but some people may not. So like,
Right. Exactly. And that's across many cultures, right?
right, exactly.
But you have people who don't understand that there are a lot of women who are close to your family, may not be blood related, but who are seen and respectfully calling them auntie, and
Hmm.
that's just the way things uncle. It's just that's the way things are. So,
Right, exactly. Like I like that you broke some of those like cultural pieces down for us that are easily digestible. So like as a reader, even if I'm from another culture, I
mhm,
easily understood it. And I was just like,
good.
oh,
That's
well,
good to hear.
that makes
You
perfect
know,
sense.
I have to thank my editor because she was very much about that. And I kind of
Mm,
like, well, this just feels a bit much. And she's like, I think you need it. I think your readers are going to need it. And I haven't heard any complaints. So, and it's nice to hear that you appreciated that. So it is something that I will continue to do moving forward
yes,
for sure.
absolutely. I loved that. And I thought, yeah, listen to the editor.
Yeah.
because
Right.
that was amazing because I appreciate that that type of cultural piece was included in there and that it
Yeah.
was easy for me to understand either through context or through the maybe small explanation that just like a
Yeah.
one little sentence to kind of explain it and I was like,
Right.
oh, that makes perfect sense.
Awesome. I'm glad
So
you did.
yeah, I greatly appreciated all of that. And I did love too in book 2 you took us to India and to
Yes. Yeah.
really immerse the readers into the sights and sounds and flavors of India.
Right. Right.
And that's something I don't see enough in romance. Like there's a lot of destinations and you kind of
Right.
globetrotted us everywhere. I kind of love that. But
Yeah.
India isn't typically where readers might find themselves and like when they read a
Right.
romance.
Right. That was it
Mhm.
definitely important to me because for me, my parents are from Bangladesh, and I had the experience of going there growing up a couple of times, and all of those experiences were very impactful to me, and how I viewed myself as one of the relatives who lives in America, and all the opportunities that I have and that kind of thing. But aside from that, I don't feel as connected to Bangladesh as I would like to now as an adult. And I wanted to make sure that I had a character who felt still connected to the motherland, and that she had relatives there. She spoke the language, 2 languages fluently. She understood the culture and
Mm.
what it was she was up against. Granted, I understand what I'm up against, but she felt it more. She was more immersed in the culture. And there are many women out there who still feel like that today. So it was really important for me to showcase that, how much being in India, the memories, the experiences, especially with her mother and her aunt, and being in the ashram, those kinds of things really
Mm.
impacted how she continued to see her life. And it was in a different direction than you would think, and it made her
Mhm.
feel more stronger independently than vice versa, where you would have an older female relative may say, oh, but you should get married and have children, where she had older female relatives telling her, you can do whatever the hell you want, you've got all the opportunity of where you come in life, and just just do it, make yourself
Mm-hmm.
happy. So I wanted to make sure to represent that, as much as a connection to the motherland, but also that we're not, not all women of a certain generation are going to push you along to have the babies and the family.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be a few quote unquote oddballs out who, will just push you to be happy. If you want to get married and have the babies, do it. But if you're not sure if that's your future, then look at something else. Make sure that you are investigating all of the options if you can.
Yeah. And I love that you had both of those voices in there because,
Mm-hmm.
because we do feel that like it almost feels like almost internalized voices in some ways. We do have that usually externally as well, but
Right.
there is also that I think, like I was mentioning, that the push and pull sometimes as women
Yes.
for
Yes.
us, like I want to live the independent life but I kind of want to have the family, but can I have it both? Can I have both?
Right. Right. And people say that, but you can have it all. Can you really though?
Really?
I
I
mean,
know
you're
that's
spread so thin.
I know, like, but really, can I though?
Yeah, exactly.
It's just,
Okay.
yeah, it's a lot, but and I think that is an expectation as women. Of course, we can do it all, right? Of course we
Right.
can. Why not shoulder
Right.
more of it? Because of course we can. But you
Yeah.
do incorporate that beautifully into the series as well, like as those voices of, yes, you can be an independent woman. That's okay. Or
Yeah.
you can have the family. And either, in both choices, I know that's been a big discourse too in romance of, either road is good, right?
Right.
As long as
Yeah.
you're happy. That's the important
Yes.
thing.
And that's what we're telling women,
Mhm.
they're because we've been told what to do since the beginning of time. So,
Right?
it's kind of like you can make whatever choice if you want to have 6 babies and be at home and do it, but make sure that you're doing it for yourself,
Mhm.
and I come back to that when I'm writing these stories and thinking about these stories because you see a lot of passive living with South Asians, even men, they do what they're told by their elders
Mm.
and they're just not happy people. And now, if you're a flat person, and I mean somebody who's not well rounded, and you feel like I need somebody to make my decisions for me and I'm just going to do that, then fine, own up to it. But, you see other people who've done what their elders tell them to do, but all they do is moan about it, and
Mhm.
it's like they're so far into their lives now with families and kids and a career that it's very hard to pull yourself out of that and go in a different direction. So it's never too late, but honestly, if you've got the inkling at a point earlier in life, maybe investigate it if you can. I'm not saying like, jump into a new career, but just is there a possibility for that to be, a success for you?
Yeah, well, it's super interesting you bring that up because we have a very close friend of my husband's who is actually of South Asian descent, and he did that. His family very much expected him to be a doctor and wanted him to go doctor. He went to school to be a doctor. That's not what he wanted though, and he
Right.
realized that, and he realized that very early on.
Okay. Yeah.
And so,
Did he
like
do anything about it?
yeah, he totally changed trajectory, went into finance.
That's awesome. Well, as long as he's happier,
He's happy. He's happy.
because medical school is serious stuff. So
It is. That's an investment.
that's a major investment in many ways. So you got to be happy with doing it. You have to
Exactly.
find something that makes you happy with that, because that is, you hear about the patients or the drama or the bureaucracy, and you decide to go in them to that. So you're going to have to deal with
You
it.
want to deal with it? Great. If you're happy, that's all that matters, right?
Yeah,
And that's what
right.
you always looking
Exactly.
for. Kushi, where can listeners find your books?
Yes. So I am available on Amazon and Kindle Unlimited. So both of the first 2 books in my series, book 1 is Passion's Liberation, is available, and book 2, Love's Liberation, is available as well. And I recently released an epilogue / bonus book called Liberated Ever After, which really just showcases, just some fun extra chapters about, how he proposed, their wedding, and a few little fun tidbits in there. And I actually do go into some explanation, hopefully not in a boring way, of, a Hindu wedding, and, some of the traditions that they decided to keep and some things they decided to toss out, and the struggles of having a multicultural wedding,
Mhm.
to be frank. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's fabulous, by the way. If you guys
Oh, thank
get a chance
you.
to read
Thank
it,
you.
yes, you should definitely read it. And how can listeners connect with you?
Yes. So I'm on Instagram and TikTok at KTS Romance. On Facebook, you can find me at Khushi T Saha. And I do have a monthly newsletter. I promise you would only get one newsletter a month if you signed up. And you can find that information on Linktree, which is at linktr.ee/KTS Romance.
Thanks so much to Khushi for joining the show. Be sure to follow me on social media at Romance the Story. That way you can keep up with new and prior guests, as well as episodes to come. Book recommendations for this episode: Passion's Liberation by Khushi T Saha and Love's Liberation by Khushi T Saha. As always, stay safe, be well, and keep writing. Bye!